Chapter 1. A Chance Encounter. The planet Vargal had long been dismissed as an insignificant speck in the galaxy, a harsh, inhospitable rock, abandoned by the races that once inhabited it. The dry winds and relentless sun baked the land, leaving behind nothing but barren stretches of cracked earth, jagged rock formations, and the remnants of ancient ruins that told the story of a long-forgotten civilization. The only inhabitants now were the scavengers, those like Drake Thorn, who had found themselves on the fringes of the galaxy with nothing but the ghosts of the past for company. Drake had been born into a life of solitude, a former soldier turned wanderer, searching the ruins of dead worlds for anything of value. Over the years, he had learned to survive on planets like this, where the only thing worth finding were the relics of once great empires and the occasional lost technology buried beneath the dust of time. He was a man out of place, a relic himself, and the harsh landscape of Vargal suited him. There, in the blistering heat, amidst the decaying ruins, he was free to work, to think, to be alone. And so, that is where he found himself today, moving through the desert like he had so many times before, his boots crunching in the dry sand, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of life. There had been rumors of something unusual in the area, an ancient alien shipwreck, lost to the galaxy, but still intact enough to be worth investigating. Scavengers had come and gone over the years, taking what they could and leaving nothing but scrap and half-buried debris behind. But this time, Drake knew something was different. He had heard whispers of a discovery, something that no one had been able to make sense of, but that was worth more than any treasure. A mystery that had piqued his interest, and his instincts told him it would lead him to something important. He had been searching for hours, trudging through the unforgiving terrain, before he finally saw it, a shadow in the distance, barely visible against the dimming sky. At first, it looked like another wreck, just another forgotten husk of a once proud ship. But as he drew closer, Drake felt a strange pull in his chest, a feeling that something about this discovery was far more significant than he had anticipated. The wreckage was vast, larger than anything he had encountered in his years of scavenging. It seemed as though the ship had crashed at an odd angle, its hull partially buried in the sand, with only the topmost part of the vessel still visible above the surface. The markings on its exterior were unfamiliar, alien, and yet there was a familiarity to them that made his heart skip a beat. The vessel's shape was sleek, designed for speed rather than durability, with smooth curves and sharp edges that spoke of a culture much more advanced than his own. It was clear that this was no ordinary ship, no simple craft that had been abandoned over the centuries. This was something else entirely, something worth more than just salvage. Drake approached the wreck cautiously, his boots sinking slightly into the soft sand as he walked around the ship's perimeter. He moved quietly, his hand resting on the blaster at his side, though he doubted that he would encounter any danger. Most of the other scavengers had long since left the area, and the planet was, for the most part, devoid of life. But even in his solitude, Drake couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. That feeling intensified as he rounded the corner of the wreck, coming face to face with a scene that would change everything. Amidst the twisted metal and debris, there was a figure, a woman lying motionless in the sand. Her form was partially obscured by the wreckage, but her presence was unmistakable. She was tall, her body slender and athletic, though her clothes were torn and covered in dirt and blood. Her skin was a strange shade of green, tinged with a silvery hue, and her long, dark hair lay tangled in the sand around her head. But what struck Drake the most were her eyes, large, glowing with an ethereal light, as though they were somehow not entirely of this world. She was not human, and yet there was a human quality to her, something that made him hesitate. His heart raced as he moved closer, kneeling beside her. The woman's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but she was clearly unconscious, injured. He could see that her left arm was twisted at an unnatural angle, the bone broken and jutting out from the skin in a grotesque angle. Her wounds were severe, but she was still alive, and that was what mattered. For a moment, Drake hesitated. This wasn't just some treasure he could take and leave. This was a life. An alien life, but still a life. He had seen his fair share of injuries, had tended to wounds in the heat of battle, but nothing quite like this. She was a stranger, an alien, And yet there was something about her that stirred something deep within him. It was a feeling he couldn't explain, a pull, a connection that made him feel as though he had no choice but to help her. He reached out, gently lifting her head, checking for any signs of consciousness. She groaned softly, her eyes flickering, but she didn't wake. Without thinking, Drake carefully lifted her into his arms, cradling her body against his chest as he made his way back toward the shelter he had set up earlier. He wasn't sure what he was doing, but instinct drove him. He had to help her. It was his responsibility now. The journey back to his small, makeshift base was a blur, his mind focused solely on the woman in his arms. The storm had begun to pick up again, the wind howling and biting at his skin, but he pressed on, determined to get her to safety. She was light, too light for someone of her apparent size, and yet her body felt strange against his, her skin cool and smooth, yet almost unnervingly firm, as though she were made of something more than just flesh. Once inside the small shelter, Drake carefully laid her on the cot, pulling a blanket over her as he went to work. He wasn't a medic, but he had enough experience to know how to clean and dress wounds, how to stabilize someone until proper help could arrive. He worked quickly but gently, setting her broken arm as best as he could, cleaning the dirt and blood from her wounds with the limited supplies he had. Despite his efforts, however, the woman remained unconscious. He could only wonder who she was, where she had come from, and how she had ended up in such a dire state. The shipwreck, the strange markings, it was all too much to ignore. He had stumbled onto something far bigger than any of the salvage jobs he had taken before. The woman was the key to whatever mystery had brought him to this planet, and he couldn't turn away now. As he finished bandaging her wounds, the woman's eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, they locked onto his. Her breathing was labored, her voice soft and strained as she asked the question that would haunt Drake for the rest of his life. Why? Why are you saving me? It was a simple question, but the weight of it was immense. There was no easy answer. No explanation he could give that would make sense. But as he looked into her eyes, those glowing, alien eyes, he knew the answer that had always been within him. Because, he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty that gripped him, I don't leave people to die, not even if they're from a world I've never seen. She stared at him, her lips curling into a faint, appreciative smile. But there was something more in her eyes, something unreadable, something that told him that this moment was only the beginning. She was more than just an injured stranger. She was part of something far larger than both of them. And as the storm raged outside, Drake had the feeling that his life had just changed forever. Drake watched as the woman's breath came more steadily now, though she still seemed too weak to speak. Her eyes lingered on him for a long moment, flickering with that strange intensity, and he felt something stir deep within him, a strange sense of being seen in a way he hadn't known was possible. Her alien gaze wasn't one of fear, nor was it the wary detachment one might expect from someone whose survival depended on keeping their distance. Instead, it was a gaze that seemed to understand, to assess him as he assessed her. Her voice, when it came again, was softer, almost a whisper. I don't understand. Why would you help me? I am nothing to you. Her words were heavy, laced with confusion and a touch of vulnerability that, despite her alien appearance, made her seem human. Drake didn't immediately answer. He was still processing the enormity of the situation. Here, in the middle of an alien wasteland, a woman, an alien woman, no less, was lying in front of him, and he had made a choice to save her. Not because of any obligation or duty, but because, deep down, something in him couldn't just let her perish. And yet, he wasn't entirely sure why. The question lingered between them, but he knew the answer wasn't something he could easily explain, not even to himself. I've seen people die before, he began, his voice rough with the weight of his own past. Hell, I've caused people to die, but I've never been the one to just walk away when I had the chance to do something, even if it's not much. He took a deep breath, looking out the small window of his shelter, where the storm was still raging outside. The wind howled like some wild creature, and the sand swirled against the walls of the structure, making everything feel more enclosed, more isolated. As if the storm itself was pushing in on them, forcing the two of them into this unspoken bond. The woman, still studying him, seemed to absorb his words with a quiet intensity. She nodded slightly, though there was an unreadable quality to her gaze. "You are a soldier, yes?" Her voice had a slight foreign cadence to it, though it was clear and composed. Drake hesitated before answering. "Used to be. I fought in wars I didn't fully understand, but I came out on the other side." Still breathing. He shrugged, not knowing why he was offering so much of himself to her. "Now, I'm just trying to get by." He looked at her again, his expression softening. "I don't know what you are, but you're hurt. And no one deserves to die alone in the desert, no matter what they've done or who they are." Her expression was unreadable, but she didn't look away. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment, as though processing what he had said. "You speak as though your words are true," she murmured softly. "As though your actions are as selfless as you believe them to be." Drake frowned, leaning forward, unsure of what she meant. "What do you mean? I have lived far longer than you. I have seen many worlds, many races, many lives lost to the hunger of the universe," she said, her voice slow but filled with an ancient weight. "I have witnessed the decisions of countless men, some of whom believed they were saving others, only to have it end in ruin." She paused, her eyes opening to meet his. "Perhaps this is no different." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, a cold shiver ran down Drake's spine. What was she talking about? Her words had a depth to them, a resonance that unsettled him. He thought back to his past wars fought, lives he had taken, the damage he had caused. Could saving her really be any different from what he had done before? Was this some kind of act of redemption, or was he simply doing what he thought was right, without fully understanding the consequences? He wasn't sure. All he knew was that he couldn't leave her there. "I don't know about your history," he finally said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "But I can't just let you die, no matter who or what you are. I've seen enough death for one lifetime." The woman was silent for a moment before her lips curled into a small, faint smile. "Then, you are a curious one, human. Perhaps that is what you are meant to be, the one who does not walk away, the one who sees. But you must understand this. What you are saving, what you are holding in your arms, is not what you think it is." Drake felt a tightening in his chest. "What do you mean? You're not going to die on me, right? You're not just going to vanish like some hologram or something." She shook her head gently. "No, I will not vanish. But I am not just an alien. Not like you know." Her eyes flashed with an intensity that made him pause, the full weight of her words sinking in. She was telling him more than he had initially realized. She wasn't just some alien in need of his help. There was something far more significant at play. Drake opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the woman's eyes grew distant. The room grew colder. He felt an almost magnetic pull emanating from her, something deep and ancient, as if the very air around them had thickened, charged with an invisible force. "You don't have to understand now," she continued, her voice becoming even softer. "But soon you will. And when you do, your choices, your actions, will have consequences greater than anything you can imagine." With those cryptic words, she closed her eyes, as if to rest, her form still and quiet, her breathing steady now. Drake sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He was no fool. He knew she had said something important, something that would reveal itself in time. But for now, he was left with more questions than answers. Chapter 2, The Power Within. Drake couldn't sleep. The hours dragged on as he sat at the edge of his small shelter, watching the woman, this alien being, this stranger rest. The storm outside had passed, but the stillness inside felt like a weight on his chest, the silence oppressive. She had said things to him, things he didn't fully understand, but he had the sinking feeling that whatever had brought her to him was more than just fate. There was something at play here, something that involved him in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. The woman, he still didn't know her name, had fallen into a deep sleep after their conversation, her breathing now steady, almost serene. But Drake couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. She wasn't just some injured traveler, left for dead in the desert. No, she was something else entirely. She had hinted at it, and something deep in his gut told him that her arrival was no accident. He stood up slowly, his joints aching from the long hours spent in the cramped shelter. He moved toward the small table where his equipment was scattered, his eyes lingering on the alien symbols etched into the wreckage of her ship, now partially visible in the back of the shelter. He had studied it briefly when he first brought her in, but now, in the quiet of the night, He couldn't resist going back to it. He ran his fingers over the symbols, feeling the strange warmth emanating from the surface, as though the metal itself was alive, responding to his touch. "What is this?" he whispered to himself, unsure if he was speaking to the wreckage or to the woman asleep behind him. The symbols glowed faintly under his fingertips, shifting in patterns he couldn't understand. But something told him they weren't just random markings. They were part of something far greater, something that linked this woman to an ancient, forgotten history. And whether he was ready for it or not, he was now a part of that history. Suddenly, he felt a presence behind him. He spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the blaster at his side, but stopped when he saw her standing there, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She was awake, watching him silently, her gaze full of both curiosity and something deeper, something ancient, something that spoke of the weight of eons. "I told you," she said softly, "you will learn in time. But be warned, what lies ahead is not for the faint of heart." Drake felt his heart race as he stared at her. "What are you talking about? What lies ahead?" "You will know soon enough," she said, her voice both soothing and foreboding. "But first, you must decide. Are you willing to see the truth, even if it changes everything you believe?" Drake felt the weight of her question settle heavily upon him. He wasn't sure if he was ready for what she was offering him. But deep down, he knew there was no turning back. No matter what the cost, he couldn't walk away now. "Then show me," he said, his voice steady despite the swirling uncertainty in his chest. And so, the journey began. The silence between them stretched for a long moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a heavy fog that refused to dissipate. Drake's mind raced, turning over her cryptic statement in his head, trying to discern if she was toying with him or if there was something more significant she was hinting at. His instincts told him that this wasn't just idle conversation, that whatever had brought them together was far deeper than the simple act of saving a life. And now, standing before him, the alien woman still recovering from the brutal injuries she had sustained had given him a choice. Her violet eyes glimmered in the dim light of the shelter, staring at him with a calm, almost unnerving intensity. For a moment, he felt like he was being drawn into something far beyond the realm of simple survival, something that involved forces he couldn't yet comprehend. His thoughts were clouded by uncertainty, but one thing was clear: there was no going back. He was already entangled in whatever it was she was offering. "I'm not sure what you mean," Drake finally said, his voice rough with confusion. "You keep talking about some truth, but I don't even know what that is. I'm just trying to survive here, keep my head down. That's all I've ever done. But now you're saying that this whole situation is more than just some wreckage in the desert." The woman took a slow step toward him, her movements fluid and graceful despite the apparent exhaustion in her limbs. She lowered herself to the cot where she had been resting, her gaze never leaving him. "Yes, it's more than just that," she said, her voice quieter now, almost as though she were speaking to herself. "You didn't just stumble upon me by accident. And I didn't crash here by chance either. The universe has a way of bringing certain individuals together at certain points in time, whether they want to be or not, whether they understand it or not." Drake shifted uncomfortably, his mind racing with 1,000 different thoughts. What was she trying to say? He had been on this planet for weeks now, months living a life of routine, doing his best to avoid complications, to stay off the radar of any authorities or mercenaries. His life had been simple. Until now, he had never expected to be wrapped up in something like this. He had never asked for any of it. And yet, here he was. "Are you saying I was chosen?" His voice was skeptical, but there was an edge of curiosity beneath it. The woman's lips curled into a slight smile, though there was a sadness to her expression, an ancient sorrow that seemed to have settled deep within her. "Not exactly," she replied. "You weren't chosen in the way you might think. But you are here now, and that means something. It means you are part of a much larger story, one that has been unfolding for eons, beyond the scope of any one person, any one species. And now, you are a part of it." Drake opened his mouth to speak, but stopped himself. What was there to say to that? His mind couldn't keep up with the implications of what she was telling him. How could he be part of something that was so vast? He was just a soldier who had fallen into this life of scavenging to survive. But now, standing before him was someone who clearly believed something entirely different. And for the first time in years, Drake felt that familiar feeling, the sensation of being completely out of his depth. "All right," he finally said, taking a deep breath as he tried to steady his thoughts. "If what you're saying is true, what happens next? What am I supposed to do with all of this?" He gestured vaguely, his hand sweeping through the air as though encompassing everything around them: the wreckage, the woman, the bizarre turn his life had just taken. She didn't immediately respond. Instead, she closed her eyes, her expression one of concentration, as though she were summoning something from within herself. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted, was deeper, more powerful, as though something had awakened inside her. "You have to understand," she began, her voice steady and firm now. "You are part of something that is much older than you can fathom. There are forces at work both within you and around you that you do not yet understand. These forces have shaped the galaxy, determined the rise and fall of civilizations, and they have always sought balance." She paused, and when she opened her eyes again, her gaze was piercing, intense. "That balance is at risk. And you, Drake Thorn, are now caught in the middle of it." Drake felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Her words were like a weight pressing against him, each syllable heavy with meaning. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He had so many questions, so many things he wanted to understand, but the magnitude of what she was saying was overwhelming. He had never imagined that his simple, solitary life could be so intricately tied to something far beyond his understanding. "I know this is hard for you to grasp," she said, sensing his confusion. "But you must trust that everything you've experienced up until this moment has led you here. To me. To this point in time. It wasn't a mistake. You were meant to be here." Drake stood up, pacing the small shelter. "Meant to be here? I'm just a guy who survives. I've never been anything special. I just take what I can find and try not to get caught in the crossfire. But you've got some kind of cosmic fate tied up in all of this, don't you? And I'm supposed to just go along with it?" The woman smiled faintly. "You are more than you think, Drake. Much more." Drake stopped pacing, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "I'm not asking for any of this. I didn't ask for your wounds. I didn't ask for you to show up on my doorstep, bleeding out in the desert. I didn't ask to be a part of some grand cosmic plan." She rose from the cot slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. She stood tall, her eyes never leaving his. "And yet, here you are. And here I am. You may not have asked for any of this, but you are part of it now. There is no going back. The path ahead is one you will have to walk, whether you want to or not." Drake stood there, staring at her, feeling the weight of her words press against him. He had been trying to escape his past, to move through life without getting tangled up in anything bigger than he could control. But it seemed that fate, or whatever forces guided the universe, had other plans. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to do. But he knew one thing. He couldn't just turn away. Not now. Chapter 3, The Awakening. Drake didn't know what woke him from his restless sleep that night. The shelter had grown quiet, save for the soft rustling of the wind outside. It was late, much later than he had expected, and for some reason, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The air inside the shelter felt thick, charged with an energy he couldn't explain. He had always trusted his instincts, had always been in tune with his surroundings, and tonight, his instincts were screaming at him. He sat up slowly, wiping the sleep from his eyes, and glanced over at the cot where the woman lay. She was still unconscious, but something about her very presence in the room felt different now. The faint glow of her eyes that had once been so dim was now flickering softly, as though they were absorbing the ambient light of the room. She was stirring, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. But as Drake watched, he noticed something else. Her body was changing. The air grew colder, and he felt an overwhelming pull toward her. His body tensed, instinctively knowing that the time had come for something important. Something unimaginable. Without warning, the woman's eyes snapped open, and for a brief, intense moment, their glowing violet hue locked onto his. She was no longer the injured woman he had saved. There was something else, something ancient, something powerful in the depths of her gaze. Her transformation was unfolding before him, and Drake could sense it. Something was awakening within her. Something more than he could fully comprehend. The woman spoke softly, her voice now filled with an eerie confidence. "It begins now, Drake. The time has come." Drake swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words settle deep into his chest. whatever lay ahead. Drake could feel the weight of the woman's words hanging in the air, the room charged with an almost electric tension. The glow from her eyes seemed to intensify, growing brighter as she sat up on the cot, her body moving with a fluid grace that was unnatural-like. She had shed the remnants of her previous vulnerability and was now something else entirely. She was no longer the injured, broken being he had carried into the shelter. Something within her had shifted, and Drake knew, deep in his gut, that what he was witnessing wasn't just a recovery, it was an awakening. Her skin shimmered, faint pulses of light emanating from her body, as though she were a vessel of energy, an entity far beyond what he had imagined when he first found her. She was no longer merely a survivor of a crash. The power surrounding her was palpable, a force that seemed to ripple through the air, distorting the very space around her. Drake stood frozen in place, unsure of whether he should approach or keep his distance. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to run, to escape this impossible situation. But he couldn't move. He couldn't look away. There was something mesmerizing in her transformation, something both beautiful and terrifying. She turned to face him, her eyes piercing through him, as though she could see every secret he had ever hidden, every flaw, every regret. She was calm, but her expression carried a quiet intensity, one that spoke of ancient wisdom and knowledge far beyond his understanding. "You've come too far, Drake," she said, her voice steady, but there was a deeper resonance to it now, as though it carried the weight of something far greater than just her words. "The universe is shifting. What you've experienced so far is only a glimpse of what lies ahead. You've opened a door, and now you must walk through it." Her words hit him like a slap, but they were nothing compared to the sensation of someone moving through the space between them, something that seemed to flow from her body like an invisible wave. It was a force unlike anything he had ever felt, and it made his heart race, his palms sweat. The room seemed to shrink, the very walls pulsating with energy as though the fabric of reality itself was being warped by her presence. For a moment, everything around him blurred, and then the force of it subsided, leaving him standing there, gasping for air. His mind was reeling, his body trembling from the power he had just felt. But the woman remained calm, her eyes glowing brightly as though nothing had changed. "I know you're confused," she said, her voice softening. "This is who I am. I am not like you, Drake. I am not bound by the same rules. I have lived longer than you can imagine. I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations, the ebb and flow of entire galaxies. I have witnessed the destruction of worlds, the unraveling of time itself. And now I am here, and so are you." Drake's breath was shallow as he tried to process everything she had just said. His head was spinning. He had always been a man of action, quick to solve problems, quick to fix things, but this was beyond his comprehension. Nothing in his life had prepared him for something like this. The questions in his mind were endless, but one stood out above all the others. "Why me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why am I part of this? Why did you come to me?" The woman's gaze softened, and she reached out a hand toward him, her fingers hovering just inches from his chest. "Because you are the one who will decide the future. You are the one who will stand at the crossroads of the galaxy, and you will choose whether it thrives or falls. I am here to guide you, but the choice will always be yours." Drake felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. The future? The crossroads of the galaxy? It sounded like something out of a legend, something too grand to be true. But her eyes, her words, and the force of her power told him otherwise. He wasn't just some random wanderer anymore. He was part of something larger, something that had been set in motion long before he even knew he existed. His mind raced, filled with conflicting emotions. He didn't want this. He didn't want to be part of some grand cosmic design. He had never asked for any of this. He had only wanted to survive, to live his life without complications, without being dragged into a world of impossible choices and power beyond his control. But now, as he looked into her eyes, he understood. He had no choice. The universe had already made its decision, and whether he liked it or not, he was a part of it. Chapter 4, The Final Choice. The silence that followed her words stretched on, and for the first time since she had awoken, Drake felt a sense of calm descend upon him. He wasn't sure if it was because of the alien woman's power, or if it was simply the realization that the decisions ahead of him were beyond his control. His path was set, And though the weight of it was crushing, there was a strange peace in accepting that he had a role to play, even if he didn't fully understand what it meant. "Tell me what I have to do," Drake said, his voice steady despite the storm of confusion swirling inside him. The woman stood slowly, her form glowing faintly in the dim light, and she began to walk toward the wreckage of her ship, the energy around her still vibrating with an almost tangible hum. "You will have to make a choice, Drake," she said softly, her tone almost reverent. "A choice that will shape the destiny of all life. You will choose whether to allow the balance of the universe to remain or whether to disrupt it. The forces that guide us are not easily swayed, but the universe always leaves room for choice." Drake followed her, his feet heavy as if each step took him closer to something he couldn't avoid. The wreckage was still just as chaotic as when he had first seen it, but now, it felt different. The ship, once a symbol of death and destruction, now seemed to hum with life. It wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a key to something much greater. The woman turned toward him, her eyes filled with a quiet certainty. "I will not stay here much longer, Drake. I have come to fulfill my role, and you must fulfill yours. The time of reckoning is upon us." Drake didn't know how much time had passed since she had first arrived, since he had made the decision to save her. It felt like days, but in reality, it had only been hours. The weight of those hours, though, felt like a lifetime. The woman was right, he had no more time to question the meaning of it all. The universe was asking something of him, and whether he wanted to or not, he was already a part of the answer. He stood still for a moment, feeling the weight of it settle deep within him, and then he finally spoke. "All right, what do I have to do?" He asked it simply, no longer looking for answers to the questions he couldn't ask. His role had been given to him, and now, he had to play his part. The woman smiled faintly, as though she had been expecting his answer. "You will come with me," she said, her voice soft yet resolute. "The journey ahead will not be easy, but it is the only path, and when you arrive at the crossroads, you will choose." The moment the words left her lips, a low hum filled the air, vibrating through Drake's chest. He felt the air around them shift, growing thicker with energy. His feet moved of their own accord, the path forward now illuminated by the faint glow of the ship. He followed the woman, knowing that what lay ahead would change everything. As they stepped into the vessel, the doors of the ship slid open, revealing a glowing interior that pulsed with an unnatural light. Drake felt his heart race as he took one last look at the world outside, a world he had known all his life. It was fading now, like a dream he couldn't hold on to. And as the door sealed behind him, Drake felt the universe shift around him. Whatever choice lay ahead, he knew he wasn't alone. And whatever the future held, he would face it head on. With that, the ship's engines roared to life, and they soared into the unknown.